is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Wednesday night on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Could be listening to us after the fact on any of your favorite podcast platforms. In any case, I can feel you. I can hear you writing a good review. I can just sense it through the screen. You're giving us a thumbs up. You're giving us 5 stars. You're writing something lovely about Jonas's black hoodie that he seems to wear. I would say at least every other podcast, Jonas. That
It's
thing
a little
really gets
tougher to
some use.
wear during the summer, Paul.
It is a little bit tough. We're not in the summer yet. We're mid-May. Summer does not begin for a while, Jonas.
Yeah, but we've had some 70-degree weather.
We have, but today was freezing cold. I would know. I was out there in Annapolis at the Naval Academy watching the soon-to-be midshipmen climb up a greased-up pole for the Herndon Monument climb today. So it was chilly out there. I can confirm.
But what you really want to talk about, Paul, is what the NFL decision makers, the NFL schedule makers,
19-year-old greased-up plebes at the Naval Academy that were climbing up that thing. No, we're going to talk today about the schedule release. Jonas, we have the schedule. What exciting news this is. We knew the teams. We just didn't know what order they were going to be in. Ooh, it's exciting. We now know when they are going to play each of these games. Jonas, how much do you look forward to schedule release day?
On a scale of like 1 to 10, relative to like regular season excitement, probably like a 3 or 4. But these are dark days for NFL content providers. Paul, you've got to give me some slack. You've got to give me some credit. I think you didn't like the analogy that I had about how there's always excitement when you go to a Chipotle order line, because yes, all the ingredients, but it's exciting every time to actually see them put together. And you push back because we're not actually getting a chance to eat them. But
yeah,
you didn't respond to my comparison that this is like a Taylor Swift set list. We know what's going to be a part of this show.
I also don't care about a Taylor Swift set list. You don't have to wait 4 months to eat the burrito that is being served to you. And honestly, I'm not. Look, I've never labeled myself as Swiftie. I like Taylor Swift. I'm not the person that gets excited about any concert set list of any performer. That doesn't get my juices flowing. Just like the schedule release, Jonas, I have to be honest, and I hope everybody clicks on this podcast and watches and listens, and I hope that they read your great work and Gianna Hahn's great work on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months about the schedule release. It doesn't get my juices flowing quite as much, Jonas, because we knew the opponents. We just didn't know what order. We didn't know exactly when, and we have to wait so long for these games to be played anyway. However, I will indulge you, and we will discuss the regular season schedule that we have learned tonight. Just tell me when and where to show up, and I'll show up. Just enough of the pomp and circumstance.
Do you want to do the preseason breakdown? How excited for you on a scale of 1 to 10 were you to figure it out that the Ravens are going to play the Eagles on Friday, August 9th at M&T Bank Stadium?
Wow. I mean, now that the streak is dead, is there anything to live for?
Is
there anything to pay attention to those games for?
They don't even get the Commanders this year. I don't know if that's because they're going to face them in the regular season.
Yeah,
I know, but they're facing the Eagles during the preseason and the regular season, so that wouldn't necessarily be a decisive factor in all that. But yeah, it's the end of an era in a lot of ways.
It is. All right, Jonas, we're going to break down this schedule week by week and give our predictions. We're also going to hand out some superlatives. But first, let's take a look at the schedule that we have on this lovely graphic for you and give our overall thoughts. The Ravens play a first place schedule, which means they're playing a lot of good teams this season. They're playing the Chiefs, obviously, to start the year. They're playing the Cowboys, the Bills, the Buccaneers, the Texans. This is also a year in which the AFC North is matched up against the NFC East, so they're playing every team in the NFC East. They also get 6 nationally televised games. 5 of those are in prime time. And they open the season, of course, with that AFC Championship game rematch in Kansas City on Thursday Night Football to kick off the entire NFL season. And wouldn't you know it, they play on Christmas again, Jonas. They did exactly what you were hoping they would do, and that's take you away from your family for the second straight Christmas day and have you flown across the country to watch football, this time on a Wednesday, not even on a Thursday, or a Sunday night like it was last year on a Wednesday.
And to such a soulful city like Houston. At least they had the decency to make the Harbaugh before Thanksgiving. I think that was my prediction that it would be a Ravens Chargers matchup on Thanksgiving. We're not getting it. We're getting it on 3 days before Thanksgiving, which is, I guess, good for us. But still, yeah, not looking forward to spending my second Christmas on the road in as many years.
You will get a lovely present at the end of the night, and that'll be a post-game podcast with me, Jonas. That's all you can ask for under your Christmas tree. Just tremendous.
I mean, like, I at least hope it's a decent game by that point.
Yeah.
I hope that the Ravens and Chargers at that point haven't just completely messed the bed. And that game, do you want to take a guess, Paul, at how many millions of dollars Netflix paid for one Netflix game, kind of prorated over the total bill was blank for these Netflix games. But do you want to take a guess at what the bill was per game for Ravens, Texans, and then Steelers, Chiefs? I think it was.
Do I even want to know? 10 million? Got to be way more than be more than that, right?
Way more.
How much?
They started the bidding at 50 million.
What? For 2 games?
Well, per game.
Oh, okay. Per game? That is unreal. That is wow.
$75 million.
And it just goes to show you where my $17 a month goes to paying Roger Goodell. All right, Jonas, let's go week by week now, and let's break down this schedule. Let's give our predictions because who even knows who's going to be on this team in 4 months? But we're here to predict who they will beat and who they will lose to, and who they might tie. Do you have any ties in your season predictions, Jonas?
No,
that's fine. I thought about it.
Quite the flex. Along those lines, I would urge everyone, even though as we're probably about to talk about how difficult this season opening stretch is, to not overreact to proclamations about how difficult or easy a team schedule is. The Ravens schedule is. Last year I was doing a little bit of research, and I think they had kind of like a middling projected schedule. Maybe it was like, close to the bottom third. Maybe it was around, I don't know. It was somewhere like between like 10 and 22, just in terms of like strength of schedule based off the combined records of their opponents. But you know what? This is like the reason why we care about this league, and the reason why there's so much hope across this league is because there's so much parity. There's so much attrition. Wouldn't you much rather face a team that finished with the same amount of wins as, say, the Bears did last year, as opposed to the Bears? Because the Bears look a lot more scary than they did now than they did, 5 months ago, because they've signed Keenan Allen, they've got Caleb Williams, all of which is to say is, there's a lot of hype for the Bills right now. There's a lot of hype for the Texans right now. There's a lot of hype for the Ravens right now. But the Ravens, despite all those predictions of kind of relatively solid but nothing spectacular in terms of their schedule strength, they finished with, according to Football Outsiders, the toughest schedule in the NFL. So we don't know jack shit right now about what exactly is going to happen. We don't know how difficult these schedules are going to be when everything shakes out. We have a pretty good idea because of just the caliber of quarterbacks on the schedule, but so much can change from spring to summer, from summer to fall, from week to week. So even though things might look grim at certain spots right now, they might not be when the chips are actually, when the dice are actually on the table, when the chips are on the table. And that could be a good thing for the Ravens, or it could be a bad thing.
Maybe an underrated factor in the reason why the NFL has such great parity is the fact that these first place teams play all the other first place teams in football, because it really is something that I think sometimes gets forgotten. But the Ravens schedule is difficult because they finished first in the AFC North last year. So you are having all the good teams beat up on each other. And as such, you are going to have some of those teams fall off. And that's why you have every year seemingly a team go from worst to first. It is a smart play by the NFL. All right, Jonas, let's start with week 1. At Kansas City on Thursday Night Football, September 5th. at 8:20. This is the rematch of the AFC Championship game. This is almost, in my mind, like a lose-lose because even if you win this game, you're just going to be reminded of how things ended last year, and especially if the Ravens win this game in stunning fashion, if they put a hurting on Kansas City, it'll be like, why didn't they just do that 9 months earlier and make our January a whole lot happier?
Do you want to take a guess, Paul? We can just
You're making me
make our
take a
bet
lot of
right now.
guesses in this.
How many runs will Derrick Henry finish with in this game? Keeping in mind,
in this game,
the last time these two teams got together,
yeah,
Justice Hill and not Keaton Mitchell, Justice Hill and Gus Edwards, I think combined for 6 carries altogether.
It's
how many total will Derrick Henry alone finish with?
I mean, I think look, the Harbaugh is going to have the weight of history on him, and he's not going to want to have that same narrative. But there is a very good chance that the Chiefs also score a whole lot more points than the 17 that they put up in the AFC Championship game, which means that the Ravens could again be trying to throw their way back into the game. This time, maybe more deservingly than last time. If I had to guess, I would guess at least 20. I would guess closer to 25 in this game.
Yeah,
maybe 23.
My joke was 7 carries for Derrick Henry on the opening possession. I think it will be. I think there will be a statement of intent. I think the Ravens, if they win the coin toss, they are opting for possession, and they are saying, "All right, you know what, Chris Jones, you said that the Ravens were the best team in the NFL. Let's see if you are up for defending, 7 runs up the gut. Let's see what you got." But this game is kind of fascinating because of where it falls. I guess we don't know a whole lot yet about what the disciplinary process for Rashee Rice actually entails, but it seems more likely than not that suspension that we all expect for him to get would start at the start of the season as opposed to just kind of beginning somewhere in the middle. So I think it's a pretty safe assumption to say that he will not be a part of this game. But on the other hand, the earlier the game is for the Ravens, the less chance that someone like Keaton Mitchell will also be available. So I think big scheme of things, Rashee Rice is definitely more valuable to the Chiefs than Keaton Mitchell is to the Ravens. But think of all the important debuts that are going to be happening for this Ravens team in this game. You've got Zach Orr, you've got Trenton Simpson, you've got Nate Wiggins, you've got so many Roger Rosengarten against a pretty good edge rush there if he is indeed starting right tackle. I mean, this game could go in so many ways because there's so many important people who are going to be under the bright lights of this Thursday night football game.
Yeah, I have Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker missing 7 field goals to the far right. But other than that, I think that
why the far right, Paul?
The Ravens come away with the win in this one, but it won't matter much because it'll just remind Ravens fans that they have so far that they have to go in the remainder of the season before they might ultimately meet the Chiefs in the playoffs again, and then it's a brand new ball game. So I have them winning this game, but who knows? Who knows, Jonas? You also give Andy Reid more time to prepare. Yeah, it can be worse.
Right. I mean, to your point, Paul, this is a no-win situation for the Ravens because they could win by 30, and people will, if the Ravens and Chiefs make the playoffs, it'll just be like the Men in Black, forget you, blinker pen, because people will be like, oh, that was a different Chiefs team. And of course, the Chiefs lost their opener to the Lions last year, and we didn't know what the Lions would be. They ended up turning out to be a pretty good team, but there's really nothing that the Ravens can do, I think, in this game to change the narrative about what the season might become, besides just Odafe Owe tearing Patrick Mahomes limb from limb in this game. Short of bodily harm to Patrick Mahomes, this is a high visibility game with low stakes.
To be clear, we don't wish any bodily harm to Patrick Mahomes, but of course, Ravens fans will root for a win in week 2. Jonas, let's go faster with these matchups because it took 10 minutes on week 1. And we have no idea who's going to be in these games.
Big one.
Week 2 against the Las Vegas Raiders. And Jonas, I realized that we might be seeing Gardner Minshew back at M&T Bank Stadium, because isn't he the Raiders quarterback at the time being? They did not go ahead and draft a quarterback in the first round. It could be the stash again, Minshew mania coming back just like he did in the Colts game. And I'm predicting in a similar fashion that we're going to get exactly the same rundown. That we're going to get the Ravens botching a lead at the end of the game. Maybe somebody, calls for a fair catch on a punt that they shouldn't have. And then we go to overtime, but I have the Ravens making just one of the plays that they should have in overtime against Minshew, and they come away with the win over the Raiders.
Is there a more dramatic come down in this NFL season than preparing to face Patrick Mahomes? Than going from preparing to face Patrick Mahomes to Aiden O'Connell / Gardner Minshew?
I think, if anything, the
Especially
hype
going
gets,
from Arrowhead to M&T?
I think there's even more juice when you got Minshew in the building. The revenge of of the Ravens defense against Gardner Minshew. What else could you want? Do you have a win or loss?
Yeah, Ravens win. I think this one is probably the. I think this was like my most sure thing that the Ravens on the Ravens schedule, which of course means that they'll probably only win by a field goal.
Of course. All right, and then week 3 at the Cowboys. What I'm predicting, Jonas, is that minutes before kickoff, the Cowboys extend Dak, CeeDee Lamb, and inexplicably Zeke Elliott to matching 8-year contracts. Yes, matching contracts. And
You can't do
as
that, Paul.
such,
Only
they
5
have
years.
to, and as such, they have to, there are a bunch of void years in the end. They have to cut half their roster. And that's why I have the Ravens coming away with a win here.
I actually have the Ravens losing here because I don't particularly like the idea of Roger Rosengarten / Daniel Failele and Ronnie Stanley trying to stop Micah Parsons. And also, to your point, if somehow your prediction for a Dak Prescott contract does not come to fruition, I think this is the kind of season where it's like a show me the money season from Dak, where he balls out because he knows that once he hits that open market next year, he's going to make it rain. And maybe he could put up a total stinker of a season and still get $60 million a year or something. But I feel like before that realization of mediocrity equaling big pay settles in, I do think that we will get a highly motivated Dak Prescott. And I think the Ravens having to go to Jerry World while there's still optimism in Dallas, having to deal with that Dallas defense, Trayvon Diggs back with Deron Bland. I just think it's going to be a tough sledding for them.
I like how you're actually providing analysis, and I'm just saying nonsense. Week 4
I'll
at home against the Bills. Sunday Night Football. This should actually be a good one on September 29th. I have the Ravens losing this game, and I have Josh Allen winning MVP, not MVP, MVP, Nickelodeon Most Valuable Player, even though the game's not even played on Nickelodeon, Jonas.
I have the Ravens winning this one because the Bills
I'm proudest of that
were
joke.
this close. The Ravens were this close to coming to Buffalo for the AFC Championship game, and I think this is pretty definitively a worse roster than last year's team with Stephon Diggs leaving and that secondary just kind of having to be replaced, wholesale. So I think this will be a really, really fun game. But I think ultimately a Ravens win.
All right, week 5 at the Bengals, October 6th. Joe Burrow's injured hand becomes, remember, he hurt his hand in the primetime matchup against the Ravens in Baltimore last year. He has been working on this hand and the strength of his grip so much that his hand becomes so strong he's able to puncture the ball and release air pressure every time he grips it. And it becomes a deflate gate like situation. He gets great grip on the ball. And even though they're playing in steady rain in Cincinnati, the Bengals come away with a win.
Paul, did you ever see? I think it was an M. Night Shyamalan movie. It wasn't Lady in the Water. It was the.
Was it a bad one or a good
M. Night
one?
Shyamalan? It was a bad one, very much a bad one. But it was like a movie where one of the characters has like a very severe strength deficit, where like his right arm is totally yoked, and his left arm,
No.
looks like yours. No offense. That's kind of what I'm
Whoa.
imagining Joe
Wow.
Burrow's forearms to be.
I'm catching strays. Do you have a winner or loss in this game, Jonas?
I'm actually going with the Bengals, just because I think at some point that the tide will probably have to turn in this series, and I just think that the Bengals, with this kind of last run of Burrow, Chase, Higgins, are going to get at least one against the Ravens, and the odds are that it'll probably happen in Cincinnati and not in Baltimore.
So through the first 5 weeks of the season, I have the Ravens with a 3-2 record. What do you have?
Also 3-2.
All right. Week 6 at home against the Commanders, October 13th. What I'm predicting for this game, Jonas, is that Jaden Daniels takes one look at Justin Madubuike on the other side and does a cartoon-esque sprint out of the stadium, like Wile E. Coyote, where like his body goes first and then his head goes second, because he is just simply so shocked at what he is about to face in the Ravens' defensive line, and that's why I have the Ravens coming away with a win.
Yeah, and this is a game that's fun to talk about in May because it's Jaden Daniels versus the guy that everyone compared him to in Lamar Jackson, but the Ravens in pretty much every phase of this game are a tier above the Commanders. And Dan Quinn was brought in to upgrade this Commanders defense, and I do not think that it's going to happen in 4 weeks time. He's going to need a lot more help.
Yeah.
Maybe the Ravens' relative lack of experience of like facing another dual threat who's not Lamar Jackson kind of nips them in the bud in some unforeseen ways. But I just think that this is a game that has a lot of meaning for the local rivalry factor, and also just the fact that Jane Daniels, it's a game in Baltimore with a rookie starting quarterback, and those games very rarely end up going well for the rookie quarterback. It doesn't matter who the coordinator is in Baltimore. They tend to make life pretty much hellish for whoever's going against them.
And it's Lamar against an NFC team, which he seems to dominate for some
Yeah.
reason. Week 7 at the Bucs on Monday Night Football on October 21st. I got nothing funny for this game. I have the Ravens winning. Who do you have?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird primetime game, right? Like it's Lamar versus Baker, but that would have been cool like 3 or 4 years ago, and not now.
They're both
Lamar,
first place teams
interestingly,
from last year. I get that,
I
but
know
I don't know if there's any juice here.
Lamar, like even less juicy is the fact that Lamar like hasn't been very good. He was good against the Bucs 2 years ago in that primetime game, but he hasn't been good. He hasn't been good against Baker. In that matchup, I think 3 years ago he had a couple stinkers against Cleveland. He had that 3 or 4 interception game in primetime. In 2022, there was that terrible game against the Panthers, which was like the game before he got hurt, where I think the Ravens had like 1 touchdown and somehow eked out a win. So hopefully he raises his game. Hopefully Baker comes to play as well, just for the sake of good entertainment. But it's just very, very hard for me to see Baker Mayfield at this point in his career, even with last year being a little bit of a Baker sans for him, like outplaying Lamar in primetime. It just, that's what I'm feeling.
All right. So week 9 against the Denver Broncos on November 3rd.
Week 8, bud.
Week 8. I totally skipped the Browns game. Sorry. It is late
because of Baker.
Because of the Baker. Yeah, I saw Browns, I guess, and assumed that we already talked about Baker. Already talked about them because of Baker. All right. For this game, Jonas, the dog pound in Cleveland becomes a literal dog pound. A storm has swept over Cleveland and forced all of the dogs from the local shelter to be housed inside the Cleveland Browns stadium, which makes the field just simply unplayable. And that'll lead to a Browns loss for some reason. All the dogs are unharmed.
Because of poop or because they've torn it up?
They've torn it up.
Okay, not poop.
Yeah. No, no dogs were harmed in the making of this podcast.
I have nothing funny to add. Maybe we'll get another fun Lamar Deshaun matchup. It's kind of wild to look back in retrospect at how the Ravens ended Deshaun Watson's season last year, but he was still the better quarterback in the second half of that game, despite being hurt in that game. Yeah, it's impossible to know whether this is finally the season where Deshaun Watson puts it all together in Cleveland. But man, that defense, they got some dogs in them. No pun intended.
There we go.
I think I picked a Ravens win over Tampa Bay, and I think I'm picking a Browns win in this one just because they have the speed to kind of match what the Ravens want to do, and I think there's enough pieces on offense if Deshaun Watson is actually like a functional quarterback in this late October meeting for them to get a win.
There's no telling whether Deshaun is even going to be healthy for this game. I mean, he's been unavailable for so much of his time in Cleveland,
I know.
and two teams in the division. I think we're going to have big question marks at quarterback. The other being Pittsburgh, because I don't know who the Ravens are going to be facing in either of these games. Pittsburgh doesn't know yet. All right, now we jump to the Week 9 matchup against the Broncos. Sean Payton at this point in the season has figured out a way to get Drew Brees to call in long distance and go directly into Bo Nix's headset, which streamlines the whole process. So it's just Brees to Nix. But I have the Ravens coming away with a win over the Broncos.
Yeah, I misspoke earlier, Paul. I said the Raiders were the easiest team on the Ravens schedule. This is the easiest team on the Ravens schedule. Pop quiz for you, Paul. Can you name 5
Stop asking me
projected
questions.
starters? Can you name 5 projected starters on the Broncos depth chart? Or just how many can you name?
Well, are we counting Bo Nix or
you're
no?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cortland
Which is
Sutton.
part of the problem, of course. Okay.
Yeah, Cortland Sutton, no longer Jerry Jeudy.
Correct. Former Raven along the offensive line. Throw you a bone there. Got a big contract last year.
The Bradley Bozeman.
Nope.
No.
Ben Powers.
Ben Powers, sorry. Who else?
Can you name anyone on defense?
No longer Justin
They do have
Simmons.
A big name cornerback. Correct. They do have a big name cornerback who you should know.
Who's their big name cornerback?
Pat Surtain.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I keep imagining he's already been traded. I mean,
for the Ravens.
Yeah. I think I'm out of guesses.
Yeah. No, we'll give you credit for 2.5 because.
Thanks.
Yeah. I think if there are early lines for this game, it would probably be something like Ravens by 10.5.
Yeah, it's going to be a blowout. I tend to think. All right, Week 10 against the Bengals on Thursday Night Football. Now, the T. Higgins drama at this point in the season, Jonas, has gotten to the point where T. Higgins has officially changed his name to T. Higgins, TEA, because there's just so much tea to be spilled here. I have the Ravens, unfortunately, however, losing to the Bengals because these divisional matchups are always going to be tight.
A fun little bit of drama here, Paul. This game is being played on November 7th. The NFL trade deadline for 2024 is November 5th. So your point about T. Higgins is a good one because this could be a game where maybe the Bengals have made a move to, restock their roster and mount up for the home stretch, or things could have just gone very, very poorly in Cincinnati, and they've traded away T. Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson is banging on the table for a trade himself, and this just gets as ugly as last year's game did in Baltimore.
Yeah. Week 11, they face the Steelers again. The Ravens could very well be facing two different quarterbacks both times that they play the Steelers because they play them Week 11 and they play them Week 16. However, we saw last year the Steelers, doesn't matter where they are in their competitive stage, they're always going to play the Ravens tough. They're always going to come away with at least one win over the Ravens per season. I have the Ravens losing this game because Russ has set up a bench press, Russell Wilson, on the team flight, and one of the weights that is sitting on the ground during turbulence bounces around, and it takes off the leg of an assistant coach for the Steelers. It's an absolute tragedy. The Steelers rally around this, and they're able to come away with a win.
Like there's a full-on dismemberment of a
Yeah. Have you seen Russell Wilson's workouts on the plane? They're legendary.
No, I confess, I know he's Mr.
Oh, you got
Unlimited.
to
I
see him.
didn't know he was Mr. Bodily Harm on a on an airplane.
He's about to
The
be.
this is I think this is the season where the tide finally starts to turn for the Ravens. This is the first of 2 Ravens wins that I'm projecting. I just think that,
Okay.
you know, unless some of that dark magic that Kenny Pickett was able to conjure over the years against the Ravens somehow finds its way into the pocket of Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, I feel like it doesn't matter how well stocked this offensive line is, or how George Pickens is able to cook Marlon Humphrey again, or what Patrick Queen might mean to this defense. I just feel like this is finally the season where the Ravens get at least one win against Pittsburgh, and
It should be.
I'm spoiler alert, picking 2 wins. I just think that that's going to be how this AFC North shapes up.
This should be the season in which the Steelers finish below 500, and yet it just doesn't seem to happen in the Mike Tomlin era. I could not disagree more strongly with some of their offseason moves, and yet I still think that somehow, some way, they will get to 8 or 9 wins.
I will say, Paul, just we talk about kind of the advantages and disadvantages of the Ravens facing teams at certain points in the schedule. Steelers probably caught a bit of a break with this one because they obviously got a lot of nice young pieces for that offensive line, but I think if you're the Ravens and you're Zach Gore, you'd probably much rather face them, in the first half of the schedule rather than the back half. It took
Yeah.
a while for that offensive line last year to get some of those young pieces up to speed, and you would imagine that Troy Fautanu would probably be in fighting shape by this point, and that
Yeah.
Steelers
First
offensive
round
line,
pick.
which had its way at certain points against the Ravens last year, should probably be on good ground, assuming good health for them.
That is the one thing that I think they did well, was address the offensive line several times in the draft. Week 12, we have the Harbaugh Bowl, or the Har Bowl, whichever you prefer, on Monday Night Football, November 25th. I have a loss in this game for the Ravens. We saw what Jim did in his first year with San Francisco. They had 11, 12 wins in their first season. He is going to come in and make an immediate impact. I think that offense is going to be a little bit better, even though Greg Roman is going to be at the helm. I have J.K. Dobbins scoring the game's first touchdown, and then after the game, he hand delivers the game ball to Eric DeCosta.
He's allowed in the Ravens locker room at this point.
They meet in the bowels of the stadium. I don't know exactly where.
Okay, all right. You and I and our very bad brains were on similar tracks for this ball. I also have the Chargers winning, and I have J.K. Dobbins scoring not the first touchdown, but the late go-ahead touchdown.
Yeesh.
And all he can do post-game in just the ultimate troll move / repudiation of everything that we know J.K. Dobbins to have been during his time in Baltimore, cannot stop singing the praises of one Greg Roman.
That would be good. All right, week 13
but a very fun game. I think we're going to have some fun imagining what the Harbaugh group text looks like before that game and then after that game.
Yeah, a lot is on the line there, and that's going to be one of the more looked forward to matchups. I kind of shocked as we predicted for the last as soon as we found out that these two teams were facing each other, we predicted this game would be on Thanksgiving because a family brings people together, and Thanksgiving would be the perfect time. Not the case, but it's okay because the Ravens played on another holiday, so another reason for us to abandon our families on a holiday. Jonas, week 13 against the Philadelphia Eagles, and if at this point you're thinking, boy, it's been a long time before we've gotten to the bye week, you'd be darn right, because the Ravens don't have their bye until week 14 and is absurdly late in the schedule. I think if anything is for certain, that is the thing that is most likely to hurt the Ravens, is just the fact that the bye week is so late. However, this game against the Eagles, week 13, the Eagles at this point have abandoned their offense entirely and have converted to a tush-push only offense, even without Jason Kelce. And so they matriculate the ball up the field with 1-yard gains. Doesn't work to their favor. Ravens come away with a win.
I'm actually predicting an Eagles win here. The first Ravens home loss. No real insights besides the fact that this is a really talented Eagles team. Obviously a lot of it depends on your taste for Jalen Hurts as a game-changing quarterback. But I think if this offensive line, has fallen into a good place in the post Kelsey world, then I think they have pretty much all the pieces that they need to be a really, really good, exciting offense. And if they can get any kind of decent linebacker play, they should have a pretty dang good defense. I think this is going to be a really, really fun game stylistically. It's also going to be the Ravens' first game against Vic Fangio since they pantsed him in that just absolute demolition derby. That was the Week 17 game against the Dolphins last year. I would imagine that Vic Fangio was probably pretty humbled by that. He's probably already started work on this Week 13 game in this offseason. But I think it's going to be this is among the very, very the most fun games on the schedule for me. I just think that the Ravens have to probably drop a game at home at some point. I think this is probably a good bet for me.
So rolling into the Week 14 bye, what do you have the Ravens record as? I think mine is 8-5.
I think mine. I believe I have them losing just one, or I believe I have them losing just once the rest of the way. So I think it was 5 losses going into this bye.
So both 8-5 going into the bye, I think is what we have predicted. All right, going into their Week 15 matchup at the New York Giants. At this point, the Giants have turned over to rookie wide receiver Malik Neighbors as quarterback one because of the failures at quarterback. Daniel Jones has been ousted. I have the Ravens winning this game. I don't want to overreact to the disastrous season that the Giants had last year, but they're just more talented than the Giants.
Yeah, they added some nice pieces on defense. Brian Burns should help.
Sure.
Losing Saquon Barkley definitely does not help. Probably bad luck for the Ravens that not only do they get this bye as late as they do, but they come back and all those benefits accrue to a game against one of the worst opponents on their schedule. I think they would probably much rather have the Week 15 game and the Week 16 game flipped around, right? Because you'd not want to take any body blows against the Giants before you face the Steelers. I think you'd much rather have those two games, flipped around, like I said. But if it's Daniel Jones versus Lamar Jackson, it's really not a contest. And, if there were any hidden tricks or any, kind of reckless play calling from Wink Martindale that might have tripped up the Ravens in their lone loss to an NFC team in the Lamar Jackson era as a starter, then that chance of a repeat is gone because Wink Martindale is now in Michigan, and now the Ravens have to worry about Shane Bowen and what little talent he has on that defensive unit.
Second matchup against the Steelers, December 21st, Week 16. Will Justin Fields be playing in this game, Jonas? And will the Steelers have Russell Wilson, who has already taken out the leg of an assistant coach, back in at quarterback?
Is there a snappy rallying cry for this unfortunate incident, Paul?
It's gotta be. I mean, think about Danger Russ, Mr. What is his thing? Mr. something? Unlimited? Mr. Unlimited?
Yeah, Mr.
Unlegged? I don't know. One-legged? All right. Jonas, what do you have for this matchup?
Xavier one-legged. I have the Ravens completing the sweep here. I just think that the Ravens would have beaten the Steelers if they'd played them in Week 16 last year, but they didn't. They waited until Week 18, so they had to play out that ugly game with a bunch of backups playing against the Steelers, and they took another loss because of it. But I just think that for as undeserving perhaps as the Steelers were of a sweep last year, even though the teams are probably more comparable talent-wise this year with what Pittsburgh did to help with roster and what the Ravens lost on their roster during the offseason. I just think that, the ball bounces funny ways sometimes, and I think that the Ravens get a nice win here.
Week 17 at the Houston Texans on Christmas Day at 4:30 on a Wednesday. And if you're saying they're going for, this is too quick a turnaround, I completely agree. However, the Steelers game is on a Saturday at 4:30, so they get a little bit of extra break here. I still think it's absurd that they're playing on a Wednesday, but I think Roquan Smith is going to write a beautiful Dr. Seuss-esque speech to give post game about coming down the Texans' chimneys and stealing all their presents, and then the Ravens lose the game and he never gets to use it.
Ooh, I would love to read the drafts file for Roquan Smith.
I can just see him like Christmas Eve. He's like really thinking about it. He's like really pondering.
Is he secretly like a slam poet in the underworld of Baltimore's jazz clubs?
I could see it. I mean, look, the guy is incredibly creative with how he dishes out his trash talk. So perhaps if slam poetry is the method he chooses to use. Are you doing some research now? I don't think that he is, Jonas.
No. I was trying to remember the name of the Ron Swanson character. Duke Silver. So, did you ever watch Parks and Rec, Paul?
I didn't, but I thought of the 22 Jump Street where he's saying Julia Roberts, Julia Rob Hurts.
Ron Swanson, played, of course, by Nick Offerman, had an alias, and spoiler alert, if you go through Parks and Rec right now, had an alias as Duke Silver, in which he performed jazz on the tenor saxophone, which was very much out of character for a guy who was, very, very, had a very, very specific place in the Pawnee political scene. And I'm just imagining what Roquan Smith's musical alias would be, or Dr. Seuss-esque alias would be.
Jonas, what is this, a win or a loss?
For the I'm predicting loss.
Okay. This is going to be a really good game, I think. I think this is going to be a whole lot closer than the time these two teams met in the playoffs last year.
I can't wait to write explainers on how to watch this game. Just one after another. Nothing but explainers on how to watch Ravens versus Texans on Netflix.
Yeah, really. All right. Finally, week 18. Now, of course, the Ravens last week 18, that game had no meaning whatsoever, and it was perhaps the ugliest game of the entire regular season. Tyler Huntley, of course, started that game. At this point in the season, based off my ridiculously unscientific win-loss record, I believe I have the Ravens at 10-6 going into this game. And so they would, in theory, probably need this win for some kind of playoff seeding. I think they are in the playoffs already heading into this game, but they still are trying to win it in order to get better seeding in the playoffs. However, I have them losing this second matchup against the Browns and falling to 10-7 on the season. Jonas, what's your prediction for week 18?
Paul, I think I speak for the people when I say, why are you such a hater, Paul?
I just think these if I learned anything from watching the divisional matchups last year, is that, the cliche, you throw the records out the window and you just let them play.
It seems like you're taking out your frustration with the NFL scheduling might on the Ravens. And I think that's unfair, Paul.
Look, the Ravens, you said off the top of the podcast, don't look at too much ahead at how good these teams are going to be, because you see parity every year. However, the schedule makers could have been nicer to the Ravens, waiting until week 14 for their bye, giving them a tough stretch going into that bye as well. I mean, going from the middle of the season onwards, going home against the Bengals, at the Steelers, at the Chargers, home against the Eagles. They obviously, to start the season, have Kansas City and Dallas and Buffalo, 3 of the first 4 weeks of the season. 10-7 is my record, only because I look at the opponents. And Jonas, I know I'm not trying to carry too much over from last year to this year, but objectively, this is a tough schedule.
We'll see. We'll see.
What do you have the record?
I'm going with the I'm going with the Ravens win in this one, which takes their record going into what should be the playoffs at 11-6. I just think that again, it's hard for me to imagine Deshaun Watson, considering everything that he's been through, making it through a full 17 game season unscathed. If he is available for this one, then obviously the Browns have a shot. But I just think that obviously, we should say that Lamar making it through another 17 game season would be an accomplishment for him, considering what happened not last season, but the previous 2 seasons. But I just think that with how the Ravens game against the Browns at M&T Bank Stadium ended last year, this is a good spot for a nice cup of revenge.
I was the optimist last year. I had them losing in the AFC Championship game, and I was correct, Jonas. This year, perhaps I'm the pessimist.
Did you have them running the ball 6 times?
Yes. If you go back and listen, actually, that is a prediction that I did make. I hit the nail on the head with that one. Jonas, do we even have time for our superlatives here, or have we essentially?
Yeah, I think so. Just kind of some rapid fire stuff.
Funniest
the game
joke
on
that
the
Paul
schedule,
made during this season predictions.
Ooh, and it looks like we're out of time. The game on this, the game on the Ravens schedule in which Derrick Henry is most likely to rush for 200 yards is what?
Ooh, great question. I like your idea of the Ravens going to Derrick Henry early in that Chiefs game in order to make a statement. But the Chiefs defense, as we know, was one of the best in the NFL last year. Defense isn't particularly sticky year to year, but I still think that Kansas City defense is going to be pretty good. If we're talking rushing 200 yards, I'd probably look to that Commanders game because I think that's a chance where the Ravens could go up early and then run the ball throughout the second half and just, cruise to a victory there. Other than that,
Yeah, I think it has to be. I
maybe
think
the
it has to
Raiders
be a
game?
game where it has to be a game. I think where they are in command throughout. So like
Yeah.
as tantalizing as picking the Eagles and their non-existent, linebacking core to really just take one, take fastball after fastball from Derrick Henry. I think it probably would be, like the Giants or the Broncos or like you said, the Commanders.
Yeah. What's your next superlative here, Jonas?
The team that we consider to be a weak an underdog on the Ravens schedule that we will be talking at the season end about how they upset the Ravens. What is the most likely, most interesting upset pick on this
I don't
Ravens
want to.
schedule?
Yeah, I don't want to pick a divisional matchup because that would
Yeah,
be a
I
little
was going to say.
boring. I really don't think the Broncos have any chance, to be honest. No matter who's starting at quarterback. The Cowboys, Bills, Chiefs, those are all going to be, pick 'em games probably. Other than that,
Could you see the Raiders doing it? Max
I
Crosby,
mean, given
Devontae
the
Adams. Maybe the Ravens just don't have an answer for Brock Bowers. Although with Kyle Hamilton, they kind of have a pretty nice slot defender
yeah,
there. I mean, could you
I,
see Gardner Minshew having some of that like ineffable late season Colts magic that he did last year, and maybe going into M&T Bank Stadium and just kind of uglying it up, and the Raiders getting out of there, and maybe Antonio Pierce is actually a good coach?
sure, yeah, I could see that happening if the conditions are as poor as they were. Was it week 2 last season in that overtime loss to the Colts? Then perhaps. Although the Ravens are seemingly built to weather that kind of storm better than they were last year, pun intended.
Most important game on the schedule is what, Paul?
Whew. Most important, I think, is going to come down to perhaps one of those divisional games near the end. Honestly, I mean, I think the Week 17 game against the Texans, though, could very much end up being the most important game of the season because I think the Ravens are not gonna be kind of cruising to the 1 seed like they were last year at that point in the season in Week 17. They're going to be playing at Houston. I think this is a Texans team that, like I said, is going to be even better than they were last year. and the Ravens are going to need that game. And so, similarly to how we were maybe talking about the Christmas Day game last year, where it was a real test for the Ravens to go into San Francisco and beat the Niners and kind of show their dominance in the NFL. I think we could be talking about that Texans game as being set up similarly.
I'm leaning toward the first month or so of the season, just because even though I'm picking the Ravens to beat the Chiefs, I just think that the fact that you have 4 teams in, like, the top 9 of the Super Bowl odds, and that's including the Ravens in Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Bills, the Bengals. I think the Ravens have to come out of that stretch with at least 2 wins, right? Like, you can't you could be going like, it's fine if they're 1 and 4 going into week 6 against Commanders, because that's a game that should be a get right kind of matchup. But I think if there is, a need for the Ravens to have a good hot start, then, taking care of the Bengals, even though it's in Cincinnati, and just giving yourself that forward momentum heading into, that second month of the season will be really, really important. I mean, obviously, the Ravens have finished the season very, very strong when they have had these runs to the number 1 seed. And so we don't want to get too hung up on just how they start the season. But I do think that they have to win at least one of those like big 3 road games from week 1 to week 5. And I think the Bengals are probably the most vulnerable team of that group.
If the Ravens come out of that 5-week stretch to start the season with 4 or 3 wins, I think we're definitely going to be hearing a lot of talk on national media, especially if they win that first game against the Chiefs, about how the Ravens are going to be right back there and they're back to Super Bowl favorites. And I think it'll probably be pretty premature because it's not how you start, it's how you finish. I know that is the toughest stretch of the Ravens season, those first 5 weeks. But I don't know. I think that that stretch is going to tell us a lot, but like you wrote on the BaltimoreBanner.com, it won't tell us everything, especially that week 1 game against the Chiefs will not tell us everything about this Ravens team.
I guess the last couple ones. Who do you think by year's end will be the best team the Ravens have faced this year? Not in terms of how they match up against the Ravens, but who will be like number 1, number 2, number 3, whatever in DVOA, or at least in their respective conference standings.
I mean, I think you can't not go with the Chiefs, back-to-back Super Bowl champs. I think
you were singing the Texans' praises pretty loudly just a minute ago.
I think the
Paul.
Texans are going to be right there. No, I absolutely do. I mean, I think the Texans could have a better regular season. I think the Chiefs may not have as good a regular season like we saw last year, but ultimately, go very deep into the playoffs because Patrick Mahomes was always playing in the AFC Championship game. So I think at the end of the year, we could be saying that again. I think the Texans, though, are probably maybe the second best team that they're going to face all season. And if I had to pick a third, this is all chalk, but I'm going with the Bills again.
Yeah, I think it's probably. I could see it being the Cowboys, even though they have some very obvious holes. Like, is Zeke Elliott really going to be their running back? Do they have competent linebacker play? Is that offensive line, competent enough with everything that they've kind of gone through these past couple of years? I mean, Dak was the MVP frontrunner for the first like 3 months of last year, and it's not hard to imagine them just really turning it on and being just a total juggernaut down the stretch. So maybe the Ravens get them before they kind of find their stride and are able to come out of Jerry World with a win. But that's, like we said, that this is a really, really challenging week 1 to week 5 stretch, with all due respect to the Washington Commanders in week 6. Last one, Paul, unless you have a superlative yourself, is there a turnaround here in terms of going from, short week to, from like a Sunday game to a Thursday game or whatever, that you think is just the most difficult or the most jarring to deal with? I mean, obviously the the Steelers to Texans game going from a Saturday to Wednesday is kind of brutal. Broncos to Bengals, Sunday to Thursday, probably less so. Is there something, or maybe it's Chargers to Eagles, a Monday to Sunday game. I don't know if the Eagles have a short week of rest themselves, but probably not. Is there a game on here that just kind of sticks out as you as being a potential red flag because of that short turnaround time that the Ravens are going to have to deal with?
I think it has to be the Christmas Day turnaround, going from that Saturday at 4:30 to Wednesday at 4:30. That's maybe an underrated thing. Even with when you have the Sunday to Thursday night turnaround, at least that's often a 1 o'clock Sunday game and an 8:20 Thursday game or whatever. This is a 4:30 game into a 4:30 game mere days later. I really don't love that at all. But it's also a tough stretch to go at Pittsburgh on November 17th to, I know they get an extra day for Monday Night Football, but they have to go across the country to at Chargers on November 25th, when they have been playing at that point for 12 straight weeks to start the season, and go up against a Chargers team that is I still think going to be much improved over next year's team, and then come home to face the Eagles. So they're really there are few light areas on this schedule that give you a lot of confidence that the Ravens will be well rested.
I will say the Ravens, it looks like, did catch a bit of a break in that week 12 to week 13 transition, because obviously they are going to have one less day of rest than the Eagles, and they're also going to have to make that cross country trip. But looking at the Eagles schedule, week 12, they are playing the Rams in LA on Sunday night. So they're going to have to deal with their own, West Coast to East Coast swing. They're going to have to deal with their own, reduction in recovery hours with that primetime kickoff. So perhaps not as drastic of an advantage as it would be normally for a team going from a Monday night game across the country to a home game at 4:25 the next week. But yeah, I mean, to go from Sunday to Saturday to Wednesday, I mean, that is 3 games in 11 days, week 15 to week 17. That is brutal. And I hope that the Ravens are in good shape, because if not, we are probably going to spend a lot of time talking to these guys about if they're getting paid enough to put their bodies through the kind of physical hell that something like that must entail.
Yeah, it's just the schedule gets sillier and sillier every year, and this year it really felt like Roger Goodell reached into his bag of silliness and just pulled out the silliest thing he could. Jonas, my only superlative I have for you is longest podcast ever, and that would be this episode. We're coming in on an hour here. It's 9:15 at night. These games aren't going to be played for 4 months. We have so much time to talk about these games. Why do we just talk about these games for an hour?
Because it's fun to do it right now, and yeah, and we can work out exactly which limit is that Russell Wilson's free weights rob a Steelers staffer of, and which limbs of Patrick Mahomes are most liable to get ripped off by Odafe Oweh in a fit of rage, of bloodlust in Kansas City.
How many dogs will end up being housed at the Browns stadium at the dog pound?
We should have Andy Koska on to talk about the virtues of adopting dogs.
Perfect. That's a wonderful idea. Not today, because today I'm going to get some sleep, Jonas. At Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano. At All Banner Sports, please like, rate, review, subscribe if you have made it through this entire episode. Hopefully you like us enough to leave us a nice review as well, in which case I will read it out here on the podcast. Jonas has wonderful work, as Gianna Han does, as Kyle Goon does, on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. We will be back